I'm getting the sense we might actually pull something off here, that it won't be utopian by any stretch, there'll be super challenges, but from what I'm seeing, it's on.
There are dire warnings that New South Wales will be hit by increasingly extreme weather.
2015 was the hottest year since climate records began.
Your show this July was the single hottest month in recorded history.
Australia sweltered through its hottest spring on record.
Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent.
The rate that's of great concern.
And what do you put that rate down to?
Oh, it's human activity.
We have everything we need. Some still doubt that we have the will to act, but I say the will to act is itself a renewable resource.
Hello and welcome to Climactic, episode 68. I'm Mark Spencer. Climactic is helping tell stories and give a platform to communities across Australia, but let's be real. Australia is vast and we are few. But our fear of missing out is very real, and we're always looking for more people to join us. But Climactic is not alone in this pursuit of community empowerment. In fact, before we began, there was a group doing amazing work under the name Rescope Radio. And now, with the brand new moniker, the RegenNarration. Anthony James, the host, has interviewed some of the biggest names and brightest minds in the regenerative movement in Australia and overseas. And we're thrilled to welcome him to the show today. Hello, Anthony. Welcome to Climactic, your humble climate community podcast.
Hello, Mark. No, it's great to be here. Thanks for reaching out.
It's a pleasure. Anthony, ever since I found out about what you were doing, I'm kind of kicking myself a bit for, doing Climactic at all, because in hindsight, I just wanted this kind of show, your show, to exist, and I kind of because I couldn't find it, I kind of made this instead.
Yeah, well, and it's evidence that you needed to, because if you couldn't find me, then other people can't find it either. So there's room for more.
Yeah, I think there is. And I think I've really enjoyed now diving into your back catalog, really, but I especially love the guests you get on are bigger names. Your background, of course, is academia. And
Some of it.
Well, some real world life in there as well.
Yeah, well, that's right. There's a bit of touring muso, a bit of business undergraduate. Supposed to go into the corporate world, but decided it actually wasn't making much sense in the context of the world, and went back to international development actually in my masters.
Wow.
and overseas, actually living it first, then did a masters and tested what I'd actually seen on the ground, other way around to probably the traditional route, and then ended up
I think your way makes
teaching.
more sense.
Yeah, well, I think so too. I'm certainly thankful for it. I'm thankful for the tests too, taking it to the body of knowledge. But yeah, I was pretty happy I sort of just went and did it. And it's probably a message for a lot of us too in that way, to just, in this time when we need to just go and get involved, you don't have to go and do a master's to do what we need to do at this point in time.
No, and no masters, it's not like we've been here before with this problem and fixed it before, and therefore we know the right answers.
Good call.
We kind of need everyone throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what works.
Hence the value, I reckon, of these podcasts, as well as a million other things, of course.
But as unconventional as your background was, Anthony, it obviously worked out to be the right recipe, because you've got not only the background, the body of knowledge, but also that self-confidence to speak to some of these bigger names, like this episode of your show, which I'm really grateful to be able to share here today on our feed. You're able to sit down and have a conversation with Damon Gameau, to whom a lot of people in the climate community in Australia now is kind of one of our rock stars, and someone who a lot of people, myself included, would be a little bit foot in mouthed to get to speak to. But you take those opportunities and you wring the absolute most you can out of them, and it's fantastic, and it's so great to be a fly on the wall for that.
Thank you, but of course at the same time it's testament to them. I mean, Damon's a case in point. Probably the last thing you'd feel when you actually speak to him is what you're describing, and he'd be probably bamboozled to think that he'd have that effect on anybody. So I think it's probably testament to the people who are doing the sort of work that Damon is, and like pretty much every other guest I've had, certainly, is that they're completely unassuming and human, and just in it for the same reasons we all are. We know that there's something pretty special that needs doing here, and we're giving it a good crack.
What was it you wanted to get out of this chat? And can you tell us a little bit about this episode, Anthony? Where did it take place?
I was lucky in a way because I'd had a chat with Damon just as the film was being finished in his home last year when we took the podcast around the country. So this one was a bit like, okay, whatever happens, but I was particularly curious because it was recorded after a screening. So it was in a Q&A after a screening of the film, the premiere of it in Perth, where I'm based. So I was really curious to see what would come back from the audience. So there's a little bit of me with a question or two, but mostly it was hearing back from people, and there were some really telling moments, and in general, a really informed and robust Q&A where almost by the end everybody was involved. So yeah, I guess that was a big point of curiosity and I guess the value of it coming out of it. So it was in the heart of Perth, right in the new fashion district actually. So the guest also with Damon was a fashionista here who started a magazine called Circular Fashion Magazine, that's right, about conscious and sustainable fashion, and we sort of threw the moniker around of regenerative fashion and what would that look like? What if that was in the movie or in the sequel? What would that look like? So she was in there too, and it was this terrific dialogue, and the impressions of the audience were really amazing, I thought, particularly because almost nobody had thought of a positive vision like that before. And if you think of that, that's stunning, that our imagination is even curtailed to such a degree in the face of, you know, the genuinely bad news that we do face. But it's not the only news we face. So that was some of the powerful stuff that obviously came out first time around with Damon, and yeah, this was a terrific compliment being after the event, as it were, but still really at the foot of the mountain in terms of getting people now more involved and more excited about the positive possibilities that are there for us to jump on board if we want to. 2040,
the inception of it and now the release and its success has been so great to see. But the trail of the film itself has also tracked quite well along with Regeneration, and there's good stuff we could be talking about, and here's a way in which we can talk about it constructively, and let's see if that gets things moving and gets other people involved.
You said a massive thing, if we can talk about it constructively. I mean, right there, setting that condition base to actually be able to engage in a way that can get more of us involved, that can bridge understanding. No small task in itself, but certainly one of the empowering angles that we can take and do more with.
I'll just say to all of our listeners on Climactic, if you haven't yet heard Regeneration, please do check it out. It's an absolute treat when it gets released every fortnight, and it's something I really look forward to. And it's nice to have something optimistic and constructive and positive to look forward to in the media space.
Yeah, good call. And ditto to you. I love what you're bringing to the table too with Climactic and all the people that are working with you on it, and all hands on deck, as a recent guest put it. The value with Damon, I mean, we did have a parallel path in a way, which was really interesting. And I mentioned it in the podcast so people will hear about it. When we did meet up and we were both flush with this sense of possibility that actually we might pull something off here. Some of the consequences are lock-in, but how we deal with them isn't. And of course how severe those consequences are of our current trajectory aren't lock-in either. So, and what we saw from farmers to pastoralists to some of the technological innovation to communities reconnecting, I mean, it is really all on out there. It's just still a little marginal, too marginal. So, but it is on, and there is a way for all of us to come into it wherever we light up. So there's a space for everyone, and it's one big invitation, really.
That's beautiful. And I'm sure you're as excited to hear this as I am. So let's roll this episode of the RegenNarration. And thank you so much for your generosity in sharing it with us, Anthony. This is great. I'm so excited.
Thanks for asking. Thanks, Mark.
And listeners, you can find a link to this episode on the RegenNarration feed and a link to the website in the show notes.
You're with the RegenNarration, exploring how people are going about regenerating life on this planet by changing the systems and stories we live by.
We're just not focusing on the right things. We put all our attention into a presidential tweet or some kind of bickering, question time, whereas these people rolling up their sleeves and getting on with things out there. And I just feel that we really need to start telling a new narrative or a new story.
That was Damon Gameau after the recent premiere of his visionary documentary film 2040. You might remember our first conversation on this podcast last year as the film was being finished. This time we're joined by a wonderfully engaged cinema audience and special guest Julie Leslie, the impressive editor of Circular Style, a new magazine about sustainable, conscious, circular fashion. What resulted was a fascinating sense of how the film is landing with people, the questions raised, stories shared, and inspiration felt. And tellingly, when I asked the audience at the outset who had previously imagined the sort of positive vision for the future outlined in the film, only a couple of people raised their hands. The film's enormous value was writ large in that moment. 2040 and these conversations are envisioning new, more aspirational stories to live by and exploring the changes we can make together that just might bring them about. Coming together on a balmy April evening in Perth, here's Damon and Julie. For those of you who are new to Damon's work with this, you might recognise him from That Sugar film as well. And that became That Sugar book, which became That Sugar guide, and That Sugar movement, no less. And that's part of the intent behind this film too, but we'll get to that a bit later. Now, who has thought of a future like this before tonight? Very few. That's really interesting. All right, let's talk. Welcome to Perth, mate. It's good to see you here. Mm-hmm. Now, we first met last year when you were finishing the film for a podcast conversation. I remember the drawdown beer props, which some of you may have noticed, the quick eyes may have noticed in there. I remember many, many dog-eared books, testament to the research that has gone into. But what I remember most, actually, is over our cup of tea afterwards, when I said, through a lot of my conversations on the podcast, I'm getting the sense we might actually pull something off here, that it won't be utopian by any stretch, there'll be super challenges, but from what I'm seeing, it's on. And then you said you had the same experience, and I've seen it in the film since that you've talked to that. Perhaps you can talk here to a bit of your experience, like that journey of making the movie and coming to that sort of feeling. What was it like?
Well, I certainly started off very apprehensive, and there's a lot of parents, I think, feeling that sense of overwhelm, that not quite knowing how to engage with this topic. And the more I learnt about how constant bombardment of negative stories and imagery affects our brain and how it does shut us off from problem solving and creative thinking, I guess the more time I spent researching and seeing just how many people are doing amazing things out there. And there were 4 or 5 stories we couldn't fit in the film. There's a ton of them. The first edit was over 3 hours. But, which gave me great hope, was that, you know, we're just not focusing on the right things. We put all our attention into a presidential tweet or some kind of bickering, question time, whereas these people rolling up their sleeves and getting on with things out there. And I just feel that we really need to start telling a new narrative or a new story in this particular topic, because there are people doing great things. Let's laud them, let's put a spotlight on them and inspire especially the younger generation to believe that we can do this. And I do think that now, especially after that Seawood experience, that was the moment where it turned for me. And I remember ringing my wife and saying, quite emotionally, that we can do it now. And we didn't put it in the film, but Brian did tell me on camera, and Tim Flannery's talked about it subsequently, that the amount of ocean between Australia and California would need about 1 to 2% of that ocean, that area, would, if we grew seaweed in just that small amount, it would sequester all of our current emissions. Like, that's how powerful the seaweed solution is. So we just got to get on with it.
So it does make me think about what you alluded to there around that we're looking at the wrong stories or getting fixated on the trivia almost, even though it's not trivial because you're talking about the President of the United States. I mean, it's not trivial, it is the hard stuff to some extent, but there is another story to focus in on. How do we go about focusing in on and making that part of our daily life?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the storytelling in this topic has been left to scientists, and that's not their remit. They're very good at reduction and looking at a problem and solving it brilliantly, but the language they use, especially in this topic, is very hard to connect with. It's anthropogenic, it's negative emissions. They're quite amorphous words. So I do feel it's really important for any storyteller, artist, poet, filmmaker, musician. We need to reignite the public imagination again and try and get people to connect to this issue and understand the metaphors we use, like I did at the start of the film there, saying this is our home. Like, it's not the environment, it's not separate from us, it's our environment. The language we use from this point on, if we're going to turn this around, is absolutely crucial.
Thanks. Julie, there was just one question emblazoned in my mind as I came here to meet you tonight, and particularly sitting here in this part of Perth now, the new part, the newest part, if regenerative fashion was in this film, or if it's in the sequel, 2040 the sequel, because there's more clearly.
2041. Yeah.
2041. What would we see?
I think the fashion story actually flows through the narrative on each of those topics. And I think whatever has brought you here tonight as well, you'll be finding, a similar narrative going through each topic that you covered. So whether it be regenerative agriculture covers, cotton production, which is a major part of the fashion industry and a big part of the problem, whether it's, our oceans and the microplastic pollution that we're facing from the way that we care for our clothes, it just weaves throughout that whole story. But if we were to look at 2040 and what we're looking ahead to, we'd be seeing at least a third of closets containing second-hand clothes, which is fantastic. Probably another third covered by sustainably sourced, ethically produced fashion that we know where it's come from, we can track its progress from seed to closet. And then probably also a large portion of it made from technical recycling, so polyesters and plastic-based fabrics and textiles that currently exist that can't be currently recycled. We're going to develop the ability to reprocess those and have a large portion of our closets made from regenerated polyester. So we'll also have a big share economy, so that wove into the story of the ride sharing. I think the way of the future is also going to be the rental market, so renting clothes for short term rather than ownership, which is also going to be great for our closets of the future.
Access, not ownership, that recurrent theme. Yeah, really interesting. There was a book that came out a year or two ago called The Empire of Things, A History of Consumption, and in it, I think he said in the average Western household we've got about 200 items in an average wardrobe and use about a third of them.
If anyone came across the War on Waste series, they covered the fact that in Australia we discard over 6,000 kilograms of textiles to landfill every 10 minutes in Australia.
Yeah, so let's pause right there. Say that again. 6 tonnes.
6 tonnes of textiles gets discarded to landfill every 10 minutes in Australia. That's a very widely accepted statistic. And we're wearing our clothes a lot less. We're producing twice the amount of clothes globally that we were doing 15 years ago, and we're wearing them on an average in Australia about 7 times before they get discarded. So it's a big waste problem that's being created in the fashion industry, and it really needs a groundswell shift, from the roots up. So yeah,
I'm really interested in that too, because then you've got the technological aspects of the way I think we can do things better. But the big bit under here is just what we choose. Yeah, it's an empowering narrative, really. Was there a hand up there? Yeah. Our first question from the audience didn't come up so well on the recording. It was to Julie, wondering what we can do about the waste she's talking about.
First of all, I would suggest that only buy what you need. If you don't need something, don't buy it. That's the most ethical and sustainable way of going forward. If you do need something, I'd certainly look at investing in something that's made with quality. So that's made with longevity, it's made to last. It's going to save you money in the future. If you're buying a cheap $7 t-shirt that's not made to last, that's going to only last you a few wears, it's going to ruin itself in the washing machine on the first wash and it has to be discarded and you need to buy another $7 t-shirt, work out the cost of that over the life, cost per wear. Whereas if you'd invested in quality to start with, it would have lasted through more washes. You could have perhaps passed it on to people because it was still in good quality condition after you finished your use with it. So really look at the long-term use. Fast fashion is really made to be disposed of, and that whole take, make, waste linear economy just isn't going to cut it in the future. We really do need a circular economy where we're not generating any waste. And our clothing doesn't need to generate waste. There's already in existence a lot of ways to recycle our clothing if we take the time and invest in being able to do so. So all the projects are there, we just need to make sure that we're supporting them and that they get the funding that they need.
Yes, please.
Hi. You mentioned that there's a lot of corporations with vested interests in pushing the stay as things are type model rather than change. And you also mentioned how while we can make the decisions ourselves, you get this constant bombardment of things are going to stay as they are or things are going to get worse. So when these powerful corporations who have the money to fund, as you say, groups and basically an avalanche of advertising of various overt and less overt ways, how can we possibly, in our current system where a lot of politics is very money driven, stand against that? Do you have any solutions for that?
Look, it's a great question, and yes, it's one of the greatest challenges we're going to face to get through this. They've been telling a really good story, and they've got a lot of money to tell that story, and they've been excellent at doing it. And that's why I think it's important for us to start telling a story together to fight that. We have to do that. That's the only way we're going to get through. And I think we should be heartened by what's happened historically, that there has been moments in time where we've been faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges like this. If you look at the abolitionists trying to overcome slavery, everyone said that the economy couldn't survive without slaves. They were laughed at on the street for questioning it. Yet 60 years later, they managed to turn it around. The suffragettes trying to get the vote for women as well were told to get off the streets. No sensible woman wants to vote. The men have the right answers. And here we stand again. Look at young Greta Thunberg and all these kids around the world that are actually standing up to these vested interests and saying, no, this is our future, we want to do something about it. And I think what we need to do is support them, get behind them and nurture them and make sure that their voices are heard, because they're the ones that are going to carry us through to a better world.
Damon, you talked to Kate Rayworth on a Monopoly board.
Yes.
Did she tell you the story about Monopoly?
Yeah, we had that in the film. I had to cut it out.
I knew it would have been. Can you tell that story here?
Well, the Monopoly was actually invented by a woman named Elizabeth McGee in 1901, and she invented the game with two sets of rules. And the reason she invented the game was to make sure we didn't get greedy and monopolise, so that anyone that landed on property, if you bought the property, another player got a little bit of money. And the game ended when the person with the least amount of money doubled their money. But Parker Brothers bought the game in 1925 and said, we like this. We'll get rid of that sharing version of the rules. We'll just keep the Monopoly rules. Cut her out of history as well. Indeed. And Monopoly is now the game that gets taught to kids. Yeah.
Speaking of the stories we tell, this stuff doesn't come out of nowhere. No. And I also raised Kate Rayworth because there's this fundamental aspect that occurs and reoccurs to me with all the stories we're telling, and even nominally the good stuff, is what's it all for? So that there was this strong thread through the film towards what the goal is, aside from, you didn't hear one kid talk about money or GDP, did you? And nor do you hear adults talk about that either whenever you ask what's most important to you. So confusing the means for the ends a bit. So if we actually do institute a goal in the framework of donut economics, for example, it could change things.
It's making visible what's invisible. At the moment, we measure our society purely on GDP, on finance, and actually was very fortunate enough. Recently, I spent 10 days in Bhutan, and I went to the Gross National Happiness Centre and spent time with their government and watched how that is implemented. And for those that don't know, the government set up something, the King actually set it up, called Gross National Happiness, and every policy decision has to be put through a lens that includes community vitality, the effect on the environment, psychological well-being, health, education, all these 9 pillars. And if the policy doesn't adhere to any of those, it gets ditched. So while we were there, the Parliament was actually debating this mining policy at the time, and they knocked it back on the grounds of what they called intergenerational equity, because they said our mining is now affecting future generations and stealing resources from them, so we need to actually cap the amount of mining. Like, an extraordinary to actually see that functioning. But what it does is just simply instill the values that we care about beyond money and make sure that anything we're devising or building in our communities comes from that base of ethics. And you feel it when you're walking around. The buildings, the schools, the way everything is designed is manifested from this really holistic approach. And look, it was heartening to see that someone is doing it and other countries are looking at implementing it.
They sure are, yeah. Over the ditch for a start, recently.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, I saw a quick hand over there. Yeah.
I'm Sam. I actually have a question for each of you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned at the start of your conversation that that scientists said that if you put in that microbe with permaculture in the oceans in just 1
Yeah.
to 2%, that you would be able to sequester all that carbon. So why is that not happening? And then, is there a reason why?
Yeah.
And then for Juliet, I recently donated a whole pile of clothes. I took it into Zara because I saw that they had like clothes recycling scheme. So I wondered if you had any knowledge, are they genuine or is that just something that they do to make you feel good but actually
Good question. Well, the first one is that I think the reason it's not happening is because people don't know about it yet with seaweed, and so we've done a whole lot of screenings for actually impact investors with the film, and Brian has raised an extraordinary amount of money already from people that want to build the seaweed, and he's in the Philippines now doing one. He did one in Bali, and in fact you can actually help us. We're launching the first one in Tasmania, off Bruny Island there, and Intrepid Foundation agreed to match fund anyone that donates money to our particular platform. And also, I'll just go on that, the film actually is just a very small part of something large we're creating. So for people that are interested, we've got a website called What's Your 2040, and if you go on there, you'll see a button that says Activate Your Plan, and you get asked a series of questions about the type of person you are, what your interests are, and what you particularly resonated with in the film, and then it spits you out your own action plan of 6 or 7 things that you can do right now on your own or in your community or with your family. From a whole, we've teamed up with about 50 different organisations around the world to take action. So seaweed is one of those.
It's a really good question about the fast fashion companies that are currently offering recycling programs. I only know of the H&M one, and there's a really good podcast interview with Claire Press on the Wardrobe Crisis podcast with the sustainability head at H&M and what they're doing with their recycling program. I do know that they've got a goal by the year 2025 to ensure that all of the textiles that are recycled with them are either recycled or downcycled. At the moment, I think they're only downcycling about 30% of what gets donated, and that tends to be the pure fibres. So they can do a lot with pure cotton or pure polyester, for example, but it's the blends that they're really struggling with. They don't have the technology yet to separate the fibres and sort of recycle them with any kind of equal quality. So they are certainly putting plans in place, and I know that that is a goal of theirs for over the next 10 years. But at the moment, yes, they are doing what they can with the fibres that they can either recycle or downcycle and stockpiling the rest, so that as soon as we have the technology, they will have the fibres to use.
I'll just add quickly too that there are companies that have just developed seaweed fibres as well. So I think Patagonia are experimenting with a new beta as well that's made of seaweed. So
who's
yet
made
another
shares
reason.
in seaweed?
That's right. Yeah.
There was a hand down here somewhere. Was it yours? Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Damon
Yeah.
and Julie. I've actually written it down, so give me a moment.
Can you stand up and give the people at the back a chance to hear as well? Thanks.
So my question for you, Damon, is what do you think the biggest emotional anchor is for people who might be fearful of the change and stepping out of their routine and comfort zone to make a step in the right direction for a sustainable future? Because I think a lot of it is quite emotional based and attachment to our comfort zone.
Yep.
So what would your advice be for people moving towards wanting to be more sustainable but a bit fearful of change?
Right.
And question for Julie, where are the best salvo stores in Perth? Thanks in advance.
Oh, yours is a lot easier than mine. I would say that I think we have an opportunity to reframe our current ecological predicament as an opportunity, as almost a gift that I often use the analogy of going to the doctor, that you go and you get told, hey, there's something really wrong with you, but it's an opportunity to change your ways and get healthy. And I think the way that our societies are heading, the instability there, but also ecologically what's happening, that there's a chance to actually fundamentally change the way we interact with each other at a community level, and also the way we interact with the land and the soils and the oceans. So I often talk about that as this is a way actually to create a much better world for our kids and for every living thing on the planet.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just on that as well, I think we've all got to be really aware of perfection paralysis.
Yeah.
We can't be perfect. We can't do it all. We can't just look at how many things that need to be done and get overwhelmed and then take no action whatsoever. So even little changes do make a big difference. One step, one change, one goal for yourself can really make all the difference. If shopping secondhand is something that you're happy to look into, there's a wealth of secondhand stores across Perth. The op shops are fantastic. That's where I do the majority of my shopping. 99% of my wardrobe is secondhand clothes. So yes, there's a comprehensive list of op shops and consignment stores in the Circular Style magazine. If anyone's interested, it's a free magazine too, by the way. The best ones I find are all over, truly. You can be guaranteed of coming up with gold in the Mount Hawthorn and Scarborough areas. There's always clusters of great op shops together. Belmont, Cannington, Willetton, Booragoon, Fremantle all have really great clusters of stores. And I also run a secondhand shopping tour of consignment stores in Perth called Shopportunity Knox. So if anyone would like to come on a consignment store tour, that's a little bit of fun and a great way to introduce you to secondhand shopping as well if you're not familiar with the process. And also offers you a little bit more higher quality curated items. So if you're interested in looking into that, just have a check on the socials.
Very good.
You were talking about goals, and there is actually a set of goals which fit perfectly within the donuts. And congratulations, Damon, on really, I guess, narrating that story so well. And that's the UN Sustainability Development Goals. So the question for you, Damon, when are you going to be presenting to the UN?
Good question.
Well, we did in November or December, and we're screening at their SDG Action Festival in May in Bonn, and they're using it at the next Climate COP in New York in September, and yeah, they've been very supportive. So they want to use our education program and share it with the world. So yeah.
Hi, Damon. My name's Robert. Thank you very much for that film. That was a real revelation. And thank you also coming here because I think you make us more conscious of the fact that we're in an economy that's driven by resources and particularly energy resources. And even today, the local business magazine was trumpeting the fact that $200 million was predicted to be spent in the next 5 to 6 years just on LNG extraction. Okay, so it is so daunting. We've got a government that's driven by the oil companies and told what they can and cannot do in terms of environmental laws, etc. We've got so much work to do. How do we overcome the sense of being completely daunted by the problem?
Yeah. Well, that's why I made the film, I think, is that we've got to shift our focus, and all we can do is what we can do and our little bit and soldier on. But in the same sense, we also are at a moment where it's not enough, I don't think, just to do our own individual actions. We've got to find ways of really finding our agency in whatever that might be. So for me, it's making films. That's what I did. Whatever you do at your work or school or community, we actually need everyone to step up that extra notch. And even on our website, we've got opportunities where people can meet together, learn what actions to take, how to approach their council, what the steps they can take, because that's the training we need to give people right now. So many people want to get involved, they just don't know how to, but this is the time that we have to actually come together. It's not enough just to do it in silos, and that's the challenge, because we're not good at talking face to face at the moment. But again, it's the opportunity.
Damon, that segues to a big part of what you were alluding to a bit before around what happens next. But there's more than what you alluded to before, right, around the website and those facilities and those organisations. There's a sort of a full outreach program and agenda you've got brewing, yes. So can you give us a sense of that?
I like that you use the word agenda. Put an agenda brewing. It is an agenda, I guess it is, yep. It's just there are so many organisations that have surprised us that really want to get involved in some way. So we're trying to turn this into a bit of a platform of solutions, like a new sort of media outlet, I suppose, and keep these stories alive. Create a place where people can come together and share ideas and vision too. Like we're offering other people's visions as well. This is mine for my daughter, but other people's might be completely different. I really wanted the film to kickstart discussion on this. Otherwise, we're going to march into someone else's future because it's currently being constructed. But we have to remind ourselves that we're capable of changing that future. And I guess the most exciting element of that is, again, at the education level for kids, is that we've worked with a group called Call Australia, and we've got a free curriculum for teachers from grade 5 to 10. It's 31 lesson plans that teachers can download straight away. And Madman very thoughtfully gave away 5,000 free tickets to teachers in the last 2 weeks of this film, and a lot of them have already booked huge sessions for their schools to come and see the film or asked to show the film at the school. So far the best screening I've had of this film. We opened it at the Berlin Film Festival, and the second screening there was for about 600 12 to 18-year-olds. And at the end of the film, they all stood up and cheered and clapped for about 5 minutes, like a rock concert. And I thought, this is great. So I really want to empower them and give them the film and say, you go, you take it, show your teachers, show your mum and dad, this is for you, and this is the future you want, so go for it.
Yeah. There's a hand up there, I promised. Yes. Yep.
Hi, just following up on that, I work in pre-service teacher preparation.
Right.
So we're preparing teachers. And one of the interesting things is that in Australia, sustainability is a cross-curricular agenda. So it's across all our agendas in how we prepare our pre-service teachers.
Right.
So there's no more single-use plastic in schools, there's no more glitter in arts. So it's just something that's actually happening. And given that your thesis is all around your 4-year-old daughter, how fantastic that is if we train our pre-service teachers to implement this in their practice.
That's it.
So well done you on a fantastic presentation and a fantastic movie tonight, but also in addressing it to 4-year-olds, because that's exactly where we need to go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's lovely to say that, because actually early on, a couple of the edits of the film, we shared some. I had so many people involved in this film. It was a little bit tough sometimes, but there was a select sort of film avant-garde that watched the film and said, we know this stuff. Why are you putting that in there? That's a trope. We all get that. I said, you get it, but that's the problem, is that your tiny slice understand that, but we actually need to make this accessible. We need kids to watch it. We need families to all come together and see the film. And we were thrilled today to find out that 100 cinemas across Australia have agreed to release the film on the 23rd of May, including Hoyts and Event Cinemas, all the big commercial ones. So our little film is going to be up there against the Avengers and the Pokemon movie. But go, you little things, and tell your friends and take their kids.
Just a question. My name is Roger Fernandez. You had set tickets aside and sent to teachers.
Yeah.
Have you got some tickets that you could have sent to our politicians and our
Yeah.
That is where the key really lies.
Yeah, it's a great question. We do have a parliamentary screening coming up in our Canberra tour, but from experience, with the Sugar film, we had 3 parliamentary screenings set up, and not one politician came to any of them, and didn't even send an intern or anyone. So, whereas in the UK we had really successful screenings, they implemented sugar taxes, and the same in New Zealand we had one, but our own government just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So, I don't think, most people are aware, but our government is just so heavily controlled and corporatised in so many ways, especially in the sugar industry, but also in fossil fuels as well. So, it's going to be up to us to shout extra loud on this one.
There were hands flashing down here. Yeah, thank you.
Damon, it's a fantastic film, and I really enjoyed it. It just seems to me that, like, a lot of what you're saying is most of the carbon can be sequestered through the seaweed thing, but is it profitable? That's the first question. And if it's profitable, why don't you just corporatize it instead of asking for donations? And then the second question is, like, I know you're doing this community thing, but it seems to me that most of the pollution is coming from, like, developing countries, like China, India. So, and so would it be more important to, help them, right? And the third thing is, and the third thing is, like, with farming, that's producing more pollution than, carbon emission. I mean, fossil fuels, as what you said. Is there a reason why they don't change the farming practices? Is it not profitable? Is it lower yielding? I mean, why don't people just do this? I mean, why are we doing this community stuff? Why don't we just, pioneer the farming and then teach the Chinese, teach the Indians,
You've asked me a lot of things there.
I just understand why.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, why don't we deal with the big things?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that 60% of our emissions come from the wealthiest 7% of the population.
Right.
So it isn't India and those developing countries that are causing the problem. They're dealing with our excess. China and America by far have the largest emissions. America per capita is astronomical. So we need to curb our ways, first and foremost. There's no doubt about that. Yes, they are growing, but India has an incredible policy around renewable energy, and what they're doing at the moment is quite remarkable. The farming one is a really tricky one because there's an old paradigm there that says more chemicals, put it on the soil, that's how you go. It's the green revolution that happened.
Is it less profitable?
Well, the problem now is that the soils are degrading. So the UN says we have 60 harvests left. That's how bad our soils are. It's a crisis. So these farmers are starting to realise, even the ones that don't believe in climate change, understand that the health of their soil is the most important thing. So they're starting to pull the carbon out of the atmosphere to put it in the soil purely for that. So that's a great thing. The problem is that it's a transition of 2 or 3 years to switch to these practices, and that's, at the current situation, a transition they can't afford because they lose their yields. So that's why these initiatives are being set up. If we had common sense government, they would penalise the polluters and use that money to pay the farmers to put it back in the soils. But we don't have a common sense. And I think the reason I emphasise communities is because I think a lot of people want more community. I think we've had a top-down structure. We've had a mechanistic way of viewing the world for a long time, and I don't think it's serving us. In fact, it's destroying the planet and it's destabilising our communities. And people don't want that. I mean, the rebellion against Trump and why they voted for Trump is the destabilisation of society. Everything's gone global. Power has been put beyond us, and we want to localise. We want to have more direct influence on where we live and have a say in that. And I think this, again, presents us an opportunity to do that, like the microgrids in Bangladesh. I saw those people, how happy they were because the profits were staying in the economy. They weren't going to an energy company elsewhere. And then there were all cascading benefits as a result of that. So I do respect your point, but that's why I emphasise that in the film, because I think we all evolve that way, close to one another, close to nature, close to the people around us. And a lot of us want that, and we're craving that again.
And what about the seaweed? Why is it not made into a business?
Well, it is. Yeah, it is. Like it's so new. But like I said, a lot of impact investors have approached Brian already, and there's a lot of money to be made in it. But again, I don't think it's a success story if 2 companies own the entire seaweed of the world. We have a Google of seaweed. Like, what's that going to do? You know, and that's I think the world we don't want to create. You know, and that's the important discussions we need to have. But thanks for your question.
It might also be worth adding that
What were we going to say?
I think the move into the community is totally essential
That's right.
in just about everything we do, because it's the systems
That's right.
that don't want to be broken
Yeah.
because they're just so well established that they don't know how to re-educate themselves.
That's right.
And only community can do that because there's the flexibility there.
Exactly.
We just have to start having permaculture gardens
That's right.
and things like that.
Amongst our cities.
And all the little things that we can do. And then it starts to happen.
It's
Like,
well
that was
said.
the beautiful thing about the movie was it's all accessible now.
That's right.
And we just have to do it.
it's well said, and I guess it's accentuated by the point I was about to make. I mean, some of the farmers and pastoralists in WA that we've been in our respective projects speaking with do say now that their returns are much better, much more resilient. Like they'll go over the dry seasons and the droughts, and you know, including the ones that have been hammering the east in the last 12 months. I saw farms that were withstanding that. You know, remarkable with some of the devastation you've seen. But notwithstanding that, they are in the minority. So Charles Massey, who you talked a bit about, Dave, he says there's 6 of them out of maybe 1,000 in the district that are doing what they're doing, even though you can see the difference over the fence. So it comes back to a bit of your point there about the other layers that hold us back, and that being, how can we admit that we were wrong? Stuff like that, fundamental stuff we all share, I think. And so I raise that as a generic point, not just, geez, could the farmers get over themselves?
But also what's encouraging too is that on a larger scale, like companies like General Mills have just pledged to switch to regenerative farming on 1 million acres. You know, and Patagonia by 2022 has said all their clothes are going to come from regenerative organic farming practices. So it is happening at a larger level as well.
Yeah. And hopefully then making it safer for others to come on and not feel so exposed, I suppose. All right, one more.
I'm Lawson, and I'm just about old enough to be starting to do that. Oh my God, do these people not know anything? Are they so young? But one of the things I'm finding is a lot of my younger colleagues and friends are buying in convenience or getting rid of stuff because they don't know how to do it themselves. And I've got some of those skills, and I really want to hand them on all sorts of levels. And the community stuff, that really struck a chord because you've got to get those skills back.
That's right.
We've outsourced everything.
Yep.
I mean, I've got a young friend who was going to throw out a whole load of shirts because the buttons had come off. And he was delighted when I brought in a needle and thread, and horrified when I showed him how to sew them off. I didn't do them for him.
I should have put you in the film. You should have been one of the stories.
How to dumb.
Yeah, okay.
Some of us are taught how to speak to people.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, take us out with a final word, Julie. Yeah.
Sorry.
Julie, please.
Just about the localisation of things. I think the further things get away from you, the less you care. You know, if it's not there right in front of you, if it's not people that you know, it's not people that you care about, it's very easy to just sweep the problem under the rug and not actually face it and deal with it. Whereas if it's, you know, a farmer that you know who's growing your food, who, you know, you go to the local farmer's market to buy your food, or you buy your clothes from op shops and you meet the volunteers that are there, or anything that you choose to spend your time or your money on, if you know the source, if you know the story of where it's come from, you care a little bit more about its origins and its future. So if we're, you know, dealing with problems that are so remote and so removed, and being able to say that's overseas' problem or that's, you know, another state's problem, then we're really not, you know, facing up to the future. Whereas if we can localise things and really deal with the source of it, then we're a lot more invested, and we care a lot more about the outcomes. So I think localising everything is really important.
Thanks, Julie. David, last words? Send us out?
Oh.
Yeah, impart some
last
wisdom.
words. Just thanks for coming, and I suppose that I might have made a film, but we're all in this together, and I just hope everyone spreads the word and tells people about it and goes to the website, activate your plan, and we're going to roll up our sleeves. And my favourite quote's from Robert Swan, and he said, the greatest threat to the planet is the belief that someone else will do it. Or save it, and there's no one else. We've got to do it. So now's the time to roll up the sleeve.
Probably my favourite quote from the film was Paul Hawkins. Out of all these ways and all these things that are happening, choose your bit. Choose what lights you up, and just get stuck in. We've all got the skills we can bring to this. We'll have a lot more on this stuff live in person, as well as the production stuff through the RegenNarration podcast. So stay tuned to that. We'll have a colleague of Kate Roadworth's out later this year as well. There will be book signings in the foyer as well. 2040 the book, because a film wasn't enough. He had time on his hands, clearly. It is a beautiful production, so you can speak to Damon and get book signings out there if you want. But for now, thanks very much for coming and making such a terrific conversation. Please give a warm hand to Damon and Julie. That was award-winning filmmaker and author Damon Gameau and editor of Circular Style magazine Julie Leslie at the premiere of 2040. The film is now screening right around Australia. For more on how to see it, or even screening it yourself, how to get hold of the book, and how to get more involved, see the links in our program details. The ReGeneration is a fortnightly podcast made ad-free and freely available for listening and resyndication, thanks to the generous support of our community of listeners and partners. Your support makes the hours of labour that go into each episode possible. So please help keep the ReGeneration on the air by donating or becoming a podcast partner via our website, regeneration.com. You'll find that in the episode details too. And please do subscribe, rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps others find us. I'll leave you with the suitably sweeping sounds of Future, composed by Bryony Marks off the 2040 soundtrack. My name's Anthony James. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to Climactic, the flagship podcast of the Climactic Collective, a podcast network dedicated to lifting the voices of the climate community. You can find out more about the people behind Climactic and all the shows we produce at climactic.fm. We are a social enterprise podcast network, and we greatly appreciate your support. You can find a link to our Pozible where you can support us directly in the show notes of this episode or from our website. Thank you for listening, and from the whole Climactic Collective, keep up the great work and take care of each other in these climactic times.
The Climactic Collective.